Hey, today I would like to talk about how you can stop feeling overwhelmed. Concretely, I want to cover 3 things. Number 1, I want to cover some of the things that you may have tried. Number 2, I want to cover why they probably didn't work. And then lastly, and this is going to be the biggest part, I want to give you 5 principles that can gradually help you become less overwhelmed as you put them into practice in your life. So let's jump right in. Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you probably have tried some things to change that. You may have tried time management or maybe energy management. You may have tried to change your mindset and just sort of like be more positive about it. You might have done to-do lists. You might have tried delegating. You might have tried asking for support. Maybe you've even worked with a coach or a therapist. And if you're watching this video, it probably didn't really resolve the issue like you wish it would have done. So let me explain why I think these things probably haven't worked like you probably wanted them to work. Now, I think the reason a lot of these approaches don't really work is because they start at the periphery. They don't really start at the center. Time management is great, and it's sort of like looking at the symptoms, not really at the root of the problem. And if we look at the root of everything, well, that's to a large extent our orientation to the world. And the change that needs to happen has to happen within you. So let me talk about 5 principles that I've discovered that I think can really help with that shift. The shift from, being overwhelmed to feeling more in your control. And these are 5 principles. So let's begin with the first one. Now, the first one that I've identified is compassionate self-understanding. Now, in our culture, we are typically not taught to be compassionate with ourselves. We're taught to be harsh on ourselves. And unfortunately, that often just makes things a lot worse. Because that way, we're just kind of like beating ourselves up, and it just perpetuates this negative cycle. In contrast, compassionate self-understanding is helping you get really clear on who you are and what you care about and why you do what you do, but sort of like from a place of being kind towards yourself. It doesn't mean that, you're going to, if you're doing something that's not helpful, that you're going to continue doing that indefinitely. That's not the point. The point is more to understand, why are you doing what you're doing? Now, that's the first one. The second one is life priorities. So once you really understand who you are and what you care about, then it becomes important to look at life priorities. And this is probably like the most important of all these principles. If you don't take anything else away from this, please, please, please take this one thing away from you. We need to have life priorities now more than ever. We live in a world, wow, there's so much going on. We have so many opportunities. Like a couple of, centuries, probably just a couple of decades ago, we didn't really have a lot of choices. 100 years ago, if you were a guy, you probably ended up doing what your father was doing. And if you were a woman, you probably ended up getting married and having children and not, so you didn't really have to consider like, oh, what are you going to do for your career? What are you going to do in terms of your hobbies and so on and so forth? So there were less choices. And thankfully now we have a lot more choices. But the problem is that if we have too many choices, it can become super overwhelming. I think there's actually some research on how people are less happy with their choices, like in a supermarket, if they have, let's say, 20 things they can choose from than if they only have 3. So ideally, we would be in situations where we only have a couple of options and then just have to pick from those. And we'd probably be happier with that than, like having a gazillion of options. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in, so we have to learn how to navigate all this opportunity and make sure that this opportunity doesn't imprison us. And the way to do that is life priorities. And that basically means that you get clear on what matters most to you. And often the question is only asked, what matters to you? What's important to you? And what's really crucial is to figure out what's most important to you. What are you willing to sacrifice for? If you could only have A or B, which one would you pick? It doesn't mean that you only end up with one of the two, but it's helpful to know what's your number one priority. And for that, getting clear on values can be super, super helpful. So what I would encourage you to do is to spend some time and just consider how you're relating to this whole topic of life priorities. And if you know what's currently the most important thing to you, maybe it's your career, maybe it's family, maybe it's your spirituality, maybe it's your health, maybe it's friendships. There's no right or wrong way here. It's really about what's true for you. And if something is really the thing that's most important to you, then can you make decisions that are in alignment with that? And that brings me to the next point, which is commitment to change. You see, it's not enough to just be clear on what really matters to us. We also have to follow through on that, because otherwise it becomes a bit of an empty talk thing. And not following through on something we need to do can create its own kind of like level of stress. So becoming really committed to the things that you care most about, it's so crucial. And thankfully, that's often not that difficult, that commitment, because if you really care about it, why wouldn't you want to go for it? Right? The only reason you wouldn't want to go for it is because of fear, which is the next principle. The next principle that can help you become less overwhelmed is to develop a healthy relationship to fear. Now, I've talked about this at length, and I can put a couple of my articles and videos in the show notes about this whole topic if you want to dive into this more deeply. At the heart of that is our relationship to fear in our culture. And in our culture, we often treat fear as an enemy, and we try to fight it or we try to flee from it. And that basically just perpetuates this, this whole cycle of escalating fear. And in your own life, you maybe have had times when you wanted to do something and your fear was acting up, and then you basically told your fear to shut up, and your fear just screamed louder. So that's clearly not really working. But not doing the things that you're afraid of also isn't necessarily working, because then, we just stay stuck in our comfort zone. However, what really works is to change from treating our fear as an enemy to treating it as a friend and as an advisor, and just listen to it. Doesn't mean we have to follow everything, but just hear what it has to say, kind of like we would treat a fire alarm, right? Like when our smoke detector is acting up in the middle of the night, I would investigate what's up. Most of the time, it's nothing, but, it's one of those things where you rather want to check one time too often than, risk being caught in a fire. Now, the last aspect is about community. As humans, we're like social creatures, and it can be so helpful to have support in our way and a supportive community that we can ask for help and that supports us. And that having those relationships by themselves can help relieve some stress and some overwhelm and make all that we're dealing with more manageable. So to summarize, what we covered in this video is things that you may have done to become less overwhelmed, and there may be things that I haven't mentioned, then I've gone into why a lot of these approaches don't really work and why it's so important to begin at the center. And I've then explained the 5 principles that you can implement in your own life that can help you start at the center. And these principles are compassionate self-understanding, life priorities, then commitment to change, developing a healthy relationship to fear, and lastly, having a supportive community. That's it for me for today. We've talked a lot about the macro level, like, the big things to implement in your life, major principles. If you also want some support on a day-to-day basis in implementing this, I've created a short free meditation. It's just 5 minutes, so you can listen to it every day or however often you want to. And you can get that for free at workyourlovecoach.com/meditation. I'll also put that in the show notes. Yeah, I really hope you enjoy that and that you can have the life that you most want. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye.